know what? They never clap when I take the stage at Discovery Church. I don't know what's up with that. Thank you for that. Hey, Envoy friends, how you doing today? You excited to be here today? Man, you should be. There's great things happening in this place. I'm excited to be with you. Excited to be with you on Mother's Day. That's a big treat for me. Hey, I say it all the time. Stacy, my wife, Jesus and Stacy are the real heroes in my story, in our family story. And I know that we're not alone in that, us and our 4 beautiful daughters. Moms, we see you. You are heroes to us. So we see you. We love you. We appreciate you. Thanks for who you are and all you do. I want to make sure I say that to you to do. It's an honor to be here today with you. Hey, I want to say something else before we jump into this. Isn't Corey a great pastor? Yeah, he really is. You know, unlike some people, I'm really bullish on the church. I'm bullish on the future of the church because of young kingdom hero leaders like Corey and tribes of kingdom heroes like you. I'm excited about what God has for the future of the church. And I'm honored to be a part of your heritage too. I don't know if you know that, but this church actually planted Discovery Church 21 years ago, way before I got there. And so a lot of what's happening over there, you're a part of that too. So thanks for that. I can tell you a lot more stories about how you've been involved in that over the years, but we'll save those for another time. I want to jump into this today with that image that's actually up on the screen. So, you know, when the publisher, they sent me 8 or 9 different potential covers for the book. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't like any of them. I absolutely, but they control that stuff. So they sent me these covers and we landed on the one that looks like this. And I have to tell you that even though I didn't really like it much at first, it's really grown on me. I kind of love the image of this window. Because just think about it, there I stand, I'm kind of in the darkness of my own life, and I'm looking out a window. I want something more out of life. I want something different. I want something better. I might even feel like something's missing in my life, and there's this path, but the path looks foggy, it looks dark, it looks ominous, it looks uncertain, it may look a bit scary, it looks anything but easy, right? I mean, that path is not sunshine and rainbows and unicorns and puppies. It looks like it's not easy. And I don't know about you, but what I've experienced in my life of trying hard to follow Jesus is this. That's what this life of following Jesus actually, what's what it boils down to. It really is. It's seldom easier and it's always better. Seldom easier, but always better. I want to ask you a question today. What if the path that actually is going to lead you to the life you want, the life that you came in here looking for today, really does require a journey back into and through the rest of your story? Let's jump back into this. Let's jump into this together today, and let's talk some more about that. I want to start with one verse today. It's actually Jesus speaking. It's in John chapter 10. So if you brought your Bible, you want to turn there, go to John 10. Jesus captures the essence of each and every one of our stories in one single verse here. I'm talking about John 10, verse 10. Here's what he says. He says, "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." Now, I want us to do something unconventional here. I want to start with the second half of the verse where Jesus basically says, hey, here's what I came to this earth to do for you. I came to bring you life. Now, the Greek word here for life is the word zoe. And it means a real life, a genuine life, an amazing life, a life to the full, an abundant life. Jesus says, hey, this is what I came to bring you, which brings us to a second question. Is that an honest and accurate description of your life today? No judgment, no condemnation. Is that an honest and accurate description of your life today? Now, for a lot of us, the answer is no. For some of us, the answer is not even close. And it feels wrong for us to say that in church. There's something about church like, I'm not supposed to say that. I'm not supposed to admit that. But for a lot of us, most of us, many of us, I would suggest all of us, but you may be the exception to that. And if so, high five to you. I think for all of us, there is a gap today between the life that we're living and the life we really want. There's some sort of gap. And the question then becomes, so what? What are we doing with that? Like, how am I, make it personal, how am I addressing that? How am I addressing the gap between the life I'm living and the life that I want, that I actually want? Now, the truth is, we turn to a lot of stuff in an effort to do that, to close that gap. We turn to success and power and prominence and position and titles and education and money and our sexuality and substances. We turn to a whole bunch of stuff in an effort to what? To close the gap and fill the emptiness that exists in our lives. That's my story. About 20 years ago now, I was in North Carolina. We lived in Raleigh, North Carolina. The church that I had planted and was leading was about a year old. And I had been a trial attorney for 10 years before I became a pastor. And so we're about a year into the church. The church was going gangbusters, going really well. And a friend of mine who led a really big church up in the Washington, D.C. area, called me one day and he said, hey, Greg, he said, I want you to come and I want you to speak to about, 700 leaders in our church. I want you to tell the story of what God's doing in your church. I'm going to bring in 3 other church planners and you guys are just going to take the stage and talk about the amazing things God's doing in your churches. And I was so excited. I'm like, yes, this is it. When I became a pastor, I'm like, man, I am now doing what God's created me to do. I'm living in my car. Now I get to go talk about that somewhere else, be on a bigger stage. It's going to be amazing. I went, I did my thing. I had a blast. Now I'm sitting on an airplane. It's a Saturday night. The day's over. I'm flying back home. I'm preaching the next morning back at our church, and I'm thinking, you know what? I need to get my notes out and review my notes. And all of a sudden, this sense of, uneasiness came over me that I just couldn't shake. And I started thinking about the 3 other church planters, pastors that had shared the stage with me that day and how they had something that I didn't. They had a peace in their lives, a contentment in their lives, they a joy in their lives, a freedom in their lives. They seemed to be more comfortable in their own skin than I was. I'm like, what is wrong with me? What's going on here? I found my calling. I get to live out and do what God created me to do. I love being the pastor of a church. I'm leading a successful, growing church, and yet at the same time, the U2 song, It's So True, I still hadn't found what I'm looking for. You ever been there? About 2-3 months later, it's a Friday afternoon, I pull in my driveway. I'm sitting in the car in my driveway trying to figure out how I'm going to go in the house and tell my beautiful wife, my 4 beautiful daughters are there, how I'm going to tell her that I had just resigned as the pastor of the church because I had an affair and totally and completely destroyed our lives. See, this is why I say that Jesus and Stacy are the real heroes in the story, because come this August, we will have been married now 40 years. 40 years. There's a whole lot. There's a whole lot to that story. She's here with me today, sitting down there. She'll be out in the lobby after we're done today. I'd love for you to talk to her about that. She's written about her perspective on that at the end of the book too. And so I started this journey with a great counselor. We get there's a stigma with counseling. Forget that stuff. Sometimes in church it's just like not cool to go to counseling. No. With the help of a great counselor and a few good friends, here's what I started to learn: the answer to every one of the questions. Now, when I tell you my story this morning, you're like, you got questions that start rolling in your mind, right? How'd that work out? And the answer to every single question, and there were lots of them. You can imagine when a pastor does what I did, there's lots of questions. How did you do that? How in the world could you do that to your beautiful wife? Didn't you love her? How could you do that to your 4 beautiful daughters? Man, dude, what were you thinking? Why did you do that? The answer to every single question was to be found in a part of my story that I'd never even considered. I'd never heard it discussed or talked about in the church. Now listen, I'm not blaming any church or any pastor. I happen to have the benefit of being in a good church. I'm just saying I never, ever, ever had heard this stuff talked about in a church. Discovering the path that would ultimately lead me to the life I wanted. Right? The life that I was pursuing required me to take a journey back into and through the rest of my story. I was aware of the things that I'd done, right? The uh-ohs, the wish I hadn't done that, like, oh, that was really bad, because we don't really forget that stuff. But here's the question: what about all the things in my almost 41 years of life at the time that had been done to me, said to me, and said about me? I'd never even thought about that stuff. So here's what I want to say to you today. Listen, it's okay to admit that life feels a little empty. It's okay to admit that there's a gap between the life I'm living and the life I want. It's okay to admit that in the church. And if you're feeling that, despite your very best Christian efforts, it's not like you're not trying. You're trying hard. You're showing up at church more often than not. Most Americans don't do that anymore. You're trying. Despite your very best Christian efforts, if you're still feeling that, here's what I want to suggest to you. Maybe it's time to stop looking around and start looking within. To stop looking around at all the things and turn to success and money and power and education and titles and sexuality and substances, all the things the world turns at, but even the things that we turn to sometimes in the church too, which are all good things, right? I'm gonna serve here, I'm gonna take this class, I'm gonna learn this, I'm gonna read this book, I'm gonna go on a mission trip. Maybe it's time to stop looking around and start looking within. That's the journey that I started on. Every single train wreck in your life, there is an opportunity in every single train wreck in your life. Every single head-on collision, there is opportunity there. What I want to tell you, though, is it's going to take some digging. It's going to take some excavation. It's going to take some exploration. It's likely going to require some real effort, and at times it's going to cause some pain. There will be times, if you really start this journey, where you're going to want to hit the eject button and just abandon the journey altogether. I know that because that was me. I felt that, and I've experienced it with hundreds of people that we have taken this journey into their stories with over these years. But at the end of the day, there is no detour. There's no way around it. The life that you want, the life that you come in here looking for it really does require a journey back into and through the rest of your story. I want to point to a couple other verses today that I think are going to be helpful for us. The next one's in Romans chapter 12. We're going to read verses 1 and 2. Paul says this. He says, "Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." So Paul says this. He says, hey, listen up. Let me tell you what this life that you're looking for, what it actually looks like. First of all, it's going to require sacrifice, is the word that Paul uses here. In other words, it's not always going to be easy. So there it is again, right? Seldom easier, life with Jesus, seldom easier, always better. And then Paul goes on to say, he says, listen, don't let yourself turn to the things that the world is turning to in an effort to close the gap or to fill the emptiness in your life. Don't turn to success and power and money and sexuality and substances. Don't turn to that stuff. Remember what the goal is here. The goal is transformation. Which brings me to another question for us. You got three choices. The first is the accumulation of information. Second, behavior modification, or transformation. And my question is, which is it? Not which should it be, all right? Not which should it be, because we know, in church world, we typically know what the answer should be, but which is actually most true today of me? Which best describes my church life, my religious life, what life with Jesus actually is today for me? Which is it? Now, the reason that I ask you that question is because of this. We cannot believe our way or behave our way to the life that we want. We can't believe our way and behave our way to the life we want. We can't. It'll get us part of the way there. I'm not saying believing the right things is not important. Very important. I'm not saying behaving is not important. Obedience is kind of a big deal. It is. But that will only get us part of the way to the life that we want. What does Paul say? He says transformation comes as we fill our minds. No, it's not what he says. But that's what we tend to focus on, right? Teach me more, teach me more, teach me more, teach me more. It drives me nuts. People leave churches. They go to other churches. Why? You ask them. They say, because I just wasn't being fed there. This is kind of a hot button topic for me as a pastor, all right? Can I rant for a second? Okay, thank you. It's not the pastor's job to feed you when you're a follower of Jesus. It's not, right? You start out as a milk drinker and you're supposed to become a meat eater, right? But we have this quest for knowledge in the church, and it's not in and of itself, it's not a bad thing. But Paul doesn't say that transformation comes as we fill our minds. He says it comes as we renew our minds. And the Greek word here for renew means renovation, right? Extreme mind makeover. Remember the show Home Makeover? Extreme mind makeover. It means a total and complete change for the better. And so my question then becomes, is that what you're experiencing in your life? Is that what you're seeing happen in your life? See, here's what we're up against in our stories. There's some real jacked up thinking in each and every one of our stories. I mean, there is some messed up, bad thinking in our stories. And I'm not talking about what you think about church, religion, politics, or even Jesus. Because that is not the thinking that is most working against me. You want to know which thinking is? It's actually what I believe to be true, what I think about me. I want to go back to John chapter 10, verse 10. Let's go to the first half of the verse. Jesus says, hey, I need you to understand this. You're up against a thief in your story who wants to steal from you, kill you, and destroy you. Now, I love how Jesus describes the enemy in our story here. He's described a lot of different ways in the Bible. I mean, Revelation 12, you got a giant red dragon. You got a snake in Genesis. You got, Peter says he's like a roaring lion who's seeking to devour you. You know, I love that piece. You know, the Lion of Judah is Jesus. All right, so the enemy in our story, I just got to talk about the lion thing for a second. He's a wannabe lion. You remember the story, the movie Lion King, right? It's the difference in, see, Jesus is Mufasa and the enemy is Scar. You got context now? But there's all these ways that the enemy is described in the Bible. But Jesus says, here's what I want you to know about him. He's a thief. I love how Jesus describes the enemy here. You want to know why? Because in order for a thief to be successful, we are not realizing what he's doing to us as he's doing it. When is the last time that you were tempted and you didn't know it? I'm going to answer for you. Never. Right? We know when temptation comes. I mean, it's not like, oh, that one caught me off guard. No. I mean, it may come out. We know. So the question then becomes, okay, so what is this thief, right? What's he up to that we're not aware of? We know when he tempts us. So what's he doing? What is he trying to steal from us? Our innocence? Yes. Our purity? Yes. Our relationship with God? Yes. Our ability to trust God? You better believe it. But I want to tell you that the thing that I believe that the enemy is trying to steal from you today and every day more than anything else is this: your ability to look in the mirror and see yourself like God sees you. Every single day of your life and story, the enemy is trying to steal that from you. So, what does this broken mess of a pastor 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, who's sitting in his driveway on a Friday afternoon, getting ready to go in and tell his beautiful wife what he's done, that he's blown up, totally and completely destroyed their lives? What is that guy, what does he believe to be true? Well, I didn't know this back then. I've learned this over the past 20 years of my life. Here's what that guy believed to be true. I am weak. I am ugly. I will never be strong. I will never be enough. I will never have what it takes to be a man, and no girl will ever be attracted to me. That was a big part of the rest of my story. That was the background music. That was the background music. That was the record that the enemy had been spinning over and over again during the course of my life, my 40 plus years of life. In numerous moments of hurt in my story, the enemy connected the dots between these moments of hurt and built a case against me. And eventually, as these messages came, I'm weak, I'm weak, I'm weak, I'm weak, I agreed that was true. And footholds, this thing called footholds got established in my life. It's all a part of a very elaborate scheme that the enemy is playing out in our lives and stories that Paul talks about in Ephesians chapter 6. He says, hey, you must be aware of the enemy's schemes. The Greek word there is methodia. It means his methods, his strategy. You got to be aware of this stuff. Now, someday when I get to heaven, I'm going to pull Paul aside and say, dude, I appreciate you telling us we got to be aware of it, but it would have been a lot easier if you'd used the next paragraph to tell us what it is, right? Well, he does. The good news is he does tell us what it is. The bad news is we got to hunt for it just a little bit. And this is chapter 3 in my book. The title of chapter 3 of the book is, it's all about this. The only easy day was yesterday. You know why I call it that? Because that's a great perspective for your life if you're trying to follow Jesus. Seldom easier, always better. It's not going to be easy. And that is one of the mottos of the Navy SEALs. And I have mad respect for those guys. So we don't have time to cover it all today. I just want to give you a couple pieces of this, but I want you to read this week Ephesians 4, 26 and 27. Read and study this week, and read 2 Corinthians 10, 3 through 5. Just put those two passages down, read those two passages. In short, here's a short skinny for today, right? The enemy hates you. He does. And he does not waste a single moment of hurt in your story. With every moment of hurt, there's a message attached to it. If you go back and think through this stuff, you'll see it. There's a message attached to it. And as these messages come to us, you're weak, you're weak, you're weak, you're ugly, you're ugly, you're ugly, whatever the message might be, as they come, they keep coming. We eventually agree that it's true, and these footholds are established in our lives. That is a problem. A foothold is a temporary place for the enemy, not Jesus, the enemy, to operate from in our lives. And see, here's what you got to understand. This temptation stuff that we talk about all the time in church, it's important, but you are always going to be most tempted where you are most broken. Okay, these temptations, like, why can't I say no to that? Because it's coming at a place where you are most broken. It is suggesting to you, hey, if you just do this, it will medicate the pain that's associated with that. What you believe to be true about you. It will, all of a sudden, for just a few minutes anyway, it's going to feel like that thing is not true. And these footholds that get established in our lives, these places to operate from, in our stories, if they're unnoticed and unaddressed, Paul says they become strongholds. This is 2 Corinthians chapter 10, that must be destroyed. That must be demolished in our lives. And so here's the cool thing about Paul. He not only tells us, hey, there's a strategy, there's a method. He's up to something, there's a scheme going on here. And then he tells us, okay, here's what it looks like. You know, these messages come, you agree, a foothold's established over the course of time. You don't address that, it's going to become a stronghold in your life. He not only presents the problem for us, Paul, he actually begins to offer us the solution. And I'm talking about 2 Corinthians 10, verse 5. Let's read it. It says, we demolish arguments, all these agreements, these arguments that have been made, the case that's been built against us, every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. Now, I want to tell you, this is a problem for us in the church, this verse, because we hear the word obedient here, and we immediately go to temptation and sin. But what I want to show you here is Paul doesn't say, we take captive every tempting thought and make it obedient to Christ. Like, I'm tempted to do this. Oh no, is that God's plan for my life? No. It doesn't say just tempting thoughts. It says we take obedient every thought, every single thought, which means the thought that comes to mind that says to me, I am weak. I will never be strong. I'll never have what it takes to be a man. We start to take these thoughts captive. We capture them for a moment and we say, listen, does this sound like Jesus? Does this sound like a God who unconditionally loves me, who has unlimited grace for me? Or does it sound like someone else? Can I tell you something about the enemy in your story? The truth is, he cares so much less about what we do, the sin, than he does about how we see ourselves because of what we've done. I'm telling you, it's true. The sin is not the win. You're tempted, you blow it again. That sin is not the win. Here's a question. How much of your sin did Jesus cover on the cross? Smart group, Corey. Well done. Yesterday's, today's, what about tomorrow's? Don't you think the enemy knows that? So why would the sin be the win? See, the sin is gone because of the broken body and the blood of Jesus. We just took communion to remember that. But what remains? I'm going to tell you what remains. Shame remains. You see, the enemy knows that over the long haul in your life, he can do so much more damage with that. And this is why discover your story, helping people discover their story is the first piece of our mission statement just up the road at Discovery Church. We exist to help people discover their stories. There is so much there. There's so much that Jesus wants to do there. The path that will lead you to the life you want. The life you come in here looking for every week. The life you came in here looking for today really does require a journey back into and through the rest of your story. Now, I want to say this to you before I leave that. you may want to grab a counselor to take that journey with you. I want to say it again. There's no shame in counseling. Great counseling changed my life forever. A part of our story and how our marriage was survived, I did 3 years of weekly counseling. Totally and completely changed my life. Great counseling can change your life. It can change yours too. And so you may want to take this journey with a counselor. But here's the question. What if the rest of your story, from this day forward, your future, really does depend on the healing of Jesus that you experience in the rest of your story from this day backward, your past? I want to tell you it does. There's so much more that every one of us can experience every single day with Jesus. I want to challenge you. I want to encourage you to chase that. And so I've talked a little bit about my story today. I got a question for you. This is really important. What's yours? What's your story as you sit here today? What's your story as you sit here on this Mother's Day? What's your story as you watch this? What's your story? I'll never be good enough, good looking enough, smart enough. I'll never be strong enough. I'm always going to be alone. I'm always going to be on my own. I'll never be successful. I'll never be worth the time of day. I'll never be desired. I'll never be pursued. I'll never amount to anything. I'm always going to be a screw up, a failure, a misfit. I'm always going to be poor, stupid. I will always be this. I will never be that. There's a lot of things I could say here. What's your story? What's your story? And here's what I want to tell you. Jesus cares about it. Jesus cares about every minute of it. And he wants to take a journey with you back into every moment of that. Now, this is all in the book, but you may never read the book. So I want to give you something today before we get out of here. These are 6 steps that I came up with after my counseling journey. He didn't walk me through, well, he actually did walk me through these 6 steps, but he didn't lay these out for me. It's just kind of the journey that I spent 3 years of my life taking. 6 steps that will help you begin to discover your story. 6 steps that I think will help you take a step towards the life that you really want. Okay, so step number 1, here we go. Think as far back in your life and story as you can remember about times and moments that hurt you, and then write them down. Okay? Can you do that? Step 2, this is important. Don't minimize or compare it, just write it down. This is where we get tripped up. There's probably some really hard stories even in this room today, worse than mine. So what happens is I look at your story and I say, I don't have a story. I minimize that moment of hurt for me because it's not as bad as yours. You can't do that. You can't compare it. And guys, this is particularly bad for us because since we were boys, it's to get up, that didn't hurt, rub some dirt on it. Be a man. You can't do that. You can't minimize or compare. You just write it down. Step 3, don't try to figure out why something hurt. Just admit that it did. 4, consider what message that moment spoke to you about you. So not only what the hurt that came, but what was the message that came to you about you in that moment? Write that down. And then as you consider these moments, step 5, think about whether any other moments in your life have suggested something similar to you about you. I promise you they have. Right? It's the same theme. It's the case that's being built against you. And then write those down. What is the theme that's been established here? These are the agreements and the footholds that have been established in our lives. And number 6, never stop digging. We have to stay in our stories. Every day you got to stay in your story. And so my counselor, when I first met with him, he made me angry because, he said, here's what we're going to do. You're going to go back as far in your life as you can remember to your childhood, and you're going to write down every moment that hurts you. And I don't think I said this to him, but I remember thinking it. I was like, dude, here's the deal. My marriage is hanging by a thread. I need you to help me with my marriage, not with my mommy stuff. But he's like, no, this is what we're going to do. And I started this journey with him. He said, I want you to make a list. My first list had 27 moments that I could remember. Some of this stuff is buried. You're going to have to dig. Some of this stuff, we buried it. There's just too much pain in that. So if I had 27 moments to begin with, now here I am almost 20 years later after I started that journey, my list is over 100 now. There's always more there. You got to keep digging, and there's always more to experience with Jesus. And so I just want to ask you this today. What would it look like for you begin to dig? Just to excavate back in your story and actually bring to Jesus not only the things that you've done, the mistakes you've made, but everything that's been done to you, and said about you. And to begin to experience him in that. See, here's the problem as you start this digging process. Awareness is not healing. Being aware of it is where we start. You can't end there because there's no healing in that. And so what we do is we bring this stuff to the surface and then we invite Jesus to lead us on a journey back into and through it, to take us back to those moments, to revisit and reinterpret each of those moments with us, to help us see the hurt, yes, but see the messages that came with that, the agreements that we've made, and the footholds and strongholds that we need to demolish that the enemy has established in our stories. So we invite Jesus into that mess because Jesus came to do so much more than just forgive us. So that we can begin to experience what? He said, I came to heal your broken heart and set your captive heart free. What does that look like in your life? So that we can experience his healing, his redemption, his restoration, his joy, his hope, his life, his freedom, the rescue that Jesus came to bring into our lives and into our stories. All that Jesus came to do for us. I'm telling you, this is a necessary part of the path that will ultimately lead you where you want to go. It will lead you to the life that you want. Hey, thanks for having me with you today. It's been an honor and a privilege, and actually it's been a lot of fun to get to be here today with you. Can I pray for us? Let's pray. Jesus, we need you. We need you, we need you, we need you. And Jesus, we need you to come and do what you've already done. To go to the cross, take care of something we couldn't take care of for ourselves. To allow your body to be broken, your blood to be poured out for us so that we could be forgiven. Yesterday's, today's, tomorrow's sin gone because of what you've already done for us. But Jesus, we just want to thank you that you tell us that the story doesn't end at the cross, that you overcame death. You stepped out of the grave, and you tell us now that that same resurrection power is available to us when we say yes to you. We follow you when we believe. You tell us that you came to give us not just an ordinary, go through the motion, complacent life of resignation. You came to give us a real life, a genuine life, a vibrant life, life to the fullest. An amazing, abundant life, and we want that. You say you came to heal our broken hearts and set our captive hearts free. And we ask you, would you come and do that? And we're all being held captive to things in our lives and stories, agreements we've made, footholds that have been established, the work of the enemy in our story. Jesus, I ask you to come, shine your light into our lives today. Give us the courage to look back at some moments that we've tried to bury ourselves because there's just too much pain in that. But we are not free yet because of that. So Jesus, lead us on this journey in a loving way, in a grace-filled way, in the tender way that only you can do. Set our captive hearts free. I pray over every heart that experiences Envoy Church this weekend, that each of us will walk away from this weekend experience invited into more with you and with more hope, Jesus, than we walked in here today with. That's our prayer. Come, Jesus, in your name. Amen.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate you, man.